So back again, Wicca and Witchcraft for Dummies. We're still on chapter 5. This is now part 4 because it's a big chapter. So because this book was written so long ago in 2005, I am going to provide at the end of this series, after we go through all the chapters, we're now going to go back past 2005 to now, between 2005 and now, and we'll talk about the new discoveries that have come forward since then. So how are we untangling the evidence of the witch hunts? Researching the witch hunts of Europe has always been a scholarly challenge. Many of the dead do not show up on official records. They died in prison, committed suicide, or in many cases, official documentation was not filed. Court records represent the opinions of judges, not necessarily the facts. Torture very often was used to extract information and confessions so that the testimony of the accused was always questionable. So we've basically got 3 sources of information that witch hunt researchers can rely on. The official records, these include the court records and reports of the accusations, arrests, investigations, court proceedings and confessions, verdicts and punishments. These records often contain detailed information about age, gender, and occupation of the accused. These documents are preserved throughout Europe and in some locations in the United States. They pose problems for 2 reasons. No standard way of conducting and reporting witch trials existed, and many of the details are open to interpretation. In addition, these witch trial records are mixed in with all the other court records of the era. Finding and compiling information is painstaking work. So because these witch hunts were going on all over the place, there was no standard method of how they were going to participate in it. They didn't have a way to communicate how each process should be carried out. What is constituted as witchcraft? Not yet, at least. So we've learned about the official records. Now we're going to talk about literature. Much of the popular knowledge about Wiccan witch trials comes from the literature of the time, including literary prose, poetry, diaries, witch hunting manuals, records of sermons preached against witchcraft, reports to church officials, writings of witch hunters, and tabloid-style accounts of the most famous witch trials. And for those of you who know, the most common source known today is the Malleus Maleficarum, which is the hammer of witches or women who commit maleficia. So the problem we have with literature sources, though, is that they're anecdotal and they're biased. They were often written with the purpose of promoting a specific view or just plain scaring the public. These sources don't give an accurate portrayal of witch trials as a whole, but only a compelling glimpse of the mindset of one individual group of people or another. Unfortunately, literature generally doesn't provide credible hard data. So we've talked about official records, we've talked about literature, and there's also art. Visual portrayals of witches in the trials. Artwork, such as the example shown below, has provided insight into attitudes and activities of the era, but like literature, it doesn't offer hard data. So you can see, for example, in this photo, it shows the women here at the stake and everyone around. So you have to remember, in all timelines, in all religions, in all belief systems, there's always people on one side or the other. And so anyone telling a story, writing a play, writing a song is going to be biased one way or the other. And because we didn't know about propaganda back then and no one really studied it, like we know now, people fell for these stories one way or the other. So on the one side, you have witches who were known for being healers and midwives, and on the other side, you have witches who were known for having big crooked noses with warts and pointy hats and black cats and brewing cauldrons and cackling and all that. Estimating the number of dead? European witch trials spanned from 1300 to 1800, but they were concentrated in the mid-1400s through the late 1600s. That's when the bulk of it took place. The witch trials occurred well before this time span, and the last legal executions happened in Europe as late as the 1790s. So in that time frame, scholarly research indicates that between 40,000 and 100,000 people were unalived in the Great European Witch Hunt. 100,000 people. Although there are many pagan books that continue to cite older statistics stating that as many as 9 million people were killed. Now, the current research indicates that this figure is too high, but many pagans continue to stand by it because, when there's a G-side happening, who's actually counting the bodies? So originally, the witch hunts took place in Europe. The European witch trials can't be explained by geography, though. The witch hunts were sporadic and spread out. Some of the areas were full-blown panic and extensive killing, where next to areas where there was no trials at all. So research does indicate that the majority of the witch trials were in Central Europe, which is Germany, Switzerland, and France. However, witch trials also occurred in the Baltics, Denmark, England, Finland, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Russia, Spain, and Sweden. And of course, the most well-known trials in the United States, which is the Salem witch trials. Those occurred in 1692 and resulted in the deaths of 20 people accused of witchcraft. But hey, USA, go big or go home with the propaganda, right? So why did the trials take place in the first place? Why did all this happen? Throughout history, humans have tried to improve their lives by using forces within themselves and forces outside of the ordinary physical world. For example, we try to heal loved ones, we try to influence the weather, we try to boost harvests, protect livestock. Shamans, witches, and others who were perceived to use these powers effectively, known as magic, have been honored and also feared. So being a witch has always been risky because it's very difficult to make sure that someone understands that you're only doing things for positivity when the connotation is that it's bad. So the witch trials were actually rare before the 14th century. Magic was punished when it was used in the commission of a crime. Magic used for good intent, for example, healing, was generally not a concern for the church or the government. So thanks to the man named Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century, Christianity began to focus on Satan's role in the fall from Eden and his ongoing efforts to deceive humankind and control human souls. According to this theology, Satan and his hosts could tempt humans away from God. Satan and his demons could enter into contracts with humans, leave marks on their physical bodies, gather humans together to worship him, engage in sexual relations with humans, and give humans powers, including the ability to fly and change form. Over the course of time, these ideas continued to evolve and spread. So, what happens with propaganda? Beliefs and practices that were not approved by the church, including magic, even for healing or other good intent, became evidence of an alliance with Satan and his demons. The practitioner of magic was now perceived as a threat. People were labeled as witches, whether they were pagan witches, people who combined Christianity and paganism, falsely labeled Christians. They were viewed as the agents of evil and misery in the world. In England, Exodus 22:18 of the Holy Bible, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," was interpreted literally. So now, this new interpretation of witches as an organized and serious danger was the theological basis for witch trials. So, to clarify though, many church courts, the Catholic Inquisition and Protestant courts, tried many alleged witches. The majority of the killings were ordered by civil, secular government courts. The dogma of the church was used to justify the arrests and the killings, both in church and in civil trials. Most researchers believe that many motives and factors may have led to the witch hunts, and it's unlikely that religion is the only cause. Most of the victims were Christians or people who combined Christianity and paganism. So I want you to connect that with what's going on today, with the far-right white Christian nationalist movement. That is a part of Christianity, but not all Christianity believes that way. It's the same with Wicca. They took a couple people who may have been suffering from some mental health issues or tortured them until they got them to sign these affidavits saying that they were having relations with the devil, and they would force these people through torture to sign these affidavits. And then they would take one person, make a big spectacle out of them in a courtroom to punish them for all the things that they did, and use that as their propaganda to say that all witches are crazy. Most of the people that were persecuted were actually pagans who were considering looking at Christianity. They had no reason to doubt it. They weren't railing against Christianity. They were just trying to figure out how to incorporate it into their daily lives. Wow, looks like we're going to need one more part to this one. If you're not already, give me a follow, a like, and a share.